Hello everyone, welcome back to Supposedly Fun. I am Greg. I am here today to tell you about two books that I recently finished. I was originally planning on doing a different video today, but I finished one of these books this morning and I have to talk to you about it. I usually give myself at least 24 hours before I talk about a book, just so I can kind of get a little bit of emotional distance from it, settle down, and form some thoughts around it. But I really enjoyed the experience of reading it, and I have to tell you about it, so I'm doing the video today instead. But let me tell you about the other one first. So the first book that I want to talk to you about is Lie With Me by Philippe Besson. This is originally published in French. It is translated by Molly Ringwald. Yes, that Molly Ringwald, the one from the John Hughes movies, who is now an author and apparently speaks fluent French and translated this book. So this book has a quote from Andre Osman, the author of Call Me By Your Name. On the cover, I have seen it frequently compared to, it has been called The French Brokeback Mountain. It has a quote from Rebecca Mackay, who wrote my favorite book from last year, The Great Believers. So you can imagine I was really excited to read this. And here's the thing. The book it has the most in common with of those is Call Me By Your Name, but it's different. For one thing, it's really short. It's basically a novella. It is 148 pages, I believe. Yes, 148 pages. So it's very short. But it's definitely, I would not at all call it The French Brokeback Mountain. I think that sets up the wrong expectation for this book. But so here's the thing. I also saw Publishers Weekly call this a plotting and predictable book, and I think that's true to an extent in that you know what's going to happen in this book, but I don't think it's 100% fair, because I think this book is really all about the writing and the psychological profile of the main character, and in that regard, I think it succeeds very well. So you go in, part of the predictability that Publishers Weekly talks about comes from the premise. You go into this knowing what happens in the central relationship, because the premise is that Philippe, now a grown man, chances upon a young man who bears a striking resemblance to his first love. What follows is a look back at the relationship he's never forgotten, a hidden affair with a boy named Thomas during their last year of high school. Without acknowledging they know each other in the halls, they steal time to meet in secret, carrying on a passionate, world-altering affair. So you go into this knowing pretty much what happens, and you know that the relationship ends, because obviously it's never forgotten. So you know exactly where this is headed. The thing is getting there. And Philippe Besson has beautiful writing. I think it's hard to really critique translations when you haven't read the original and don't know French to read the original. But it's very well written, very well told. What's interesting is that Call Me By Your Name is very much like in the immediate moment where Elio and Oliver are meeting, falling for each other, and it's very much about that experience. This, Philippe is looking back at his life from the modern year. So he has the benefit of hindsight, he has the benefit of knowing how his life turned out. He frequently will say things like, oh, but then this in later years this happened. So there's a back and forth, a push and pull between the past and the present, which is not present in Call Me By Your Name or most books like this. And I think that's actually a really interesting way of approaching it. Philippe is, in both time periods, a very introspective person. So the way he thinks about things, he gives you the room to determine whether or not he's right about things. And I think he himself is looking for answers. He's trying to he's reasoning things out as he's talking to you about them. I think because the book is so short, it doesn't have the emotional impact that Call Me By Your Name had, and I feel, I don't know that I would have made the connection if it wasn't right there on the cover, but it doesn't have the big emotional impact. I don't feel as invested in this relationship that he's talking about as I do in other, like Call Me By Your Name or even Brokeback Mountain, to go to the other one that this book has been compared to. And that kind of leaves it a little bit at a remove from me, if that makes sense. But I think what's really interesting is that it looks at, so Philippe, and since I finished this book, I've been trying to research whether or not it's based on reality, and I can't find an answer because most of the articles about this book are in French, and I don't, and Google Translate, it could only help so much. There was an article in the New Yorker that discussed whether or not it is based on real events or if it's something fictional that Philippe Besson, but it doesn't answer the question. So I don't actually know. But what happened, Philippe Besson's the main character is named Philippe. The romantic interest is named Thomas Andrew. The book is dedicated in memory of Thomas Andrew, and so if nothing else, it's blurring the line between fiction and reality. But I can't determine how much exactly. So that part is really interesting, and what's also interesting is that Philippe he comes out of the closet. He goes on to have many relationships with men in his life. And he becomes a famous writer. He's outspoken about being gay, but Thomas ends up exploring a very different path, and it's about that. It's very much about the costs of remaining closeted at this time when they are in a relationship in 1984. They cannot afford to let anybody know what's going on between them. They are very much hidden about it, and that part to me is fascinating and absolutely worth reading. I don't think this book has the emotional punch that I wanted it to have, but I still think it's a very urgent tale. I think it's a very well-written tale, very good, and it's so short that, it's well worth your time. I could have finished this in one day if I'd had the time, but unfortunately I could not, so it was spread out over 2 days. But yeah, I do recommend this book. I feel like I've criticized it a little bit, but I do actually recommend it, and I enjoyed it. So that takes us to the other book, the one that I'm so eager to talk to you about, and that is A Place for Us by Fatima Farheen. Mirza. I was listening to the audiobook of this. I finished it this morning, and I did a video earlier this year about books that have made me cry, because there were only 12 on my Goodreads profile in the folder for books that have made me cry, and we got number 13 right here. I was weeping this morning. I was basically that GIF of Tobias Funke from Arrested Development crying in the shower, like biting down on this. Yeah, that was me this morning, getting ready for work. So I think that's why I had to urgently talk to you about this. So yeah, there you go. It's the second book this year that has made me cry. There are not that many that have, but I've had 2 this year. I don't know if there will be a third. Stay tuned. So this book is about a family. And the framework for it is that it's a family who immigrated to the United States from India, and the framework is that the oldest daughter, Hadia, is getting married, and her family is kind of fractured. Her brother has not been around. He has been kind of estranged from them for a couple of years at that point, and she wants him to come to the wedding, and he agrees to come. So the pitch for this book is that he comes to the wedding, and it's about what happened to this family and whether or not they can fix it. The structure of the book actually goes back and forth a lot. I will say the audio is beautifully performed, but I really wish I had read the book in physical form, because it goes back in time so much, and it can go back in time or back and forth in time so abruptly that it's occasionally disorienting, and you have to stop, back up a little bit, and figure out where you are in the chronology. But that really didn't take away from the book. It was, like I said, the audiobook is performed beautifully, and I really enjoyed it. But I do wish I had read the physical book instead. So what's really interesting about this is usually when there is a kind of dramatic family novel, there's one specific inciting event that caused the separation, or that caused an argument that led to the separation. And this book does kind of have that, but Fatima Farheen Mirza is insightful enough to know that fractures can form in a family over many years. They can happen very slowly. The little things can cause cracks that get bigger over the years. Resentments can build. And there usually isn't one specific thing that you can point to that says this is why this family is broken, or why we have to get back to figure out what we can do. It's such a great portrait of a family. I honestly don't know, I can't think of a book that has portrayed a family unit so well. Each person in the family has their own distinct personality. They speak in the very similar voices, but each one has their own unique identity, and you really get the sense that they are part of a family, that they love each other, but they also have resentments and jealousies and things that they're bitter about and things that they're happy about. And oh God, it's so well done, and so it's so good. And I think part of why I really loved this book as much as I did, and part of why I was so eager to speak to you about it, is that we all bring our own emotional baggage into the books that we read. And for me, I come from a very complicated family. I have a very complicated relationship with my mother in particular. So reading about these complex portrayals of family relationships really just like got me right here. And it's so beautifully done, and just the depiction of the family ties that they have and how they can be angry at each other and love each other at the same time is so good. And the other thing that's interesting is I have been a foster father for about a little over a year now. And so I'm relatively new to the idea of fatherhood. The ending of the book is from the perspective of the father of the family. And I think that's part of what landed so hard with me, because I've been thinking about fatherhood, and I've been in this situation with a foster son where the slightest wrong word really means something and can have a huge impact, and that really resonated with me a lot. And it's not that all fathers don't have things where they could say the wrong thing and it causes a big argument, or accidentally give the wrong impression to someone in their family, or be harder on somebody because but not get across that they're being hard on somebody because they love them and want them to do better. But I don't know, I just feel like I've been in a kind of exaggerated version of that for the last year. So my dog is barking, I'm sorry. And it's just, yeah, this is where usually I feel like having the extra 24 hours lets me get my thoughts to a point where they're a little more coherent. But I just had to talk about it because I loved it so much. And like I said, it made me cry. I actually really want to get myself a physical copy of this book. I loved it that much. I had gotten the audio from the library, and I really want to go back and read it again. It's so beautiful and so well written. I did not expect to love this book as much as I did, but it is definitely a contender for my favorite book of the year. Where it will be in the top 3, because I had already decided what my top 2 were. Where it will be in that top 3, I don't know. I think I need to give myself 24 hours before I say that, but because right now I'm in that space where I had this giant emotional reaction to this book. But anyway, I recommend it. Go figure. I'm sure you could guess from all of my gushing about it. But definitely check it out. It's so good. And just how good it was makes me really want to check out Sarah Jessica Parker's other pick for Hogarth. So this was the first book published from Sarah Jessica Parker's imprint for Hogarth, which is called SJP for Hogarth, I think. Very creative name. Anyway, it's got me really wanting to check out the second book, because if her first pick was this good, I gotta believe that hopefully the second one will live up to it. So, and I am very curious to see what Fatima Farheen Mirza does in the future, because this is her debut novel, and it is so good, and it is so perceptive and so emotionally resonant, and it's just very precise in a lot of ways. I think she's a huge talent to watch. I did a video yesterday about authors who could become part of the literary canon, and it's definitely too soon to tell for her. She's only published 1 book, but I think she's a talent to watch. This book is so good. I recommend it. Anyway, I will stop gushing. I just had to tell you about that book. If you've read either of these and have opinions, please let me know. If you have recommendations based on these, please let me know. If you've read the other Sarah Jessica Parker selection for Hogarth, which I think is called Golden Child by Claire Adam, I'd have to look it up. But if you've read that, let me know what you thought. And yeah, thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you are already subscribed, thank you for that. And if not, I hope you enjoyed this enough to hit subscribe. I'll be back again. And until then, happy reading.